Uh, Before we even actually get started with the slides, we have a quick survey like we did yesterday near the end of our session, except for today, we're going to do it at the beginning. If you guys just want to head over to Top Hat, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. But we're just want to get some feedback on how you guys found last week's assignment. I know I helped one or two of you just throughout the week with that assignment. So uh yeah, so I'm just gonna start that question now. Whenever you guys are ready, just fill it out. Okay, the question is up. You should see this. And if you guys wouldn't mind too, like if you guys had any trouble with the assignment, what did you guys have trouble with? If you guys want to just put something in the chat, I'm curious to see where you guys had most of your problems. If you missed the last session, the slides are on the Shoe Lake Ignite website. And you can just watch those slides as well, or read through those slides. You can also go to our YouTube and watch the recording from last week as well if you'd like. Do you know how to access those two? Yeah, no worries. That being said, though, to you guys, I would recommend that after the sessions, that if you have time to, you look through the slides again, because I know I've been getting some people saying that sometimes the sessions are a little fast. Keep in mind we want to what's it called? We want to be able to cover everything in the lectures in the time or in this cover everything in the slides in the time that we have. So sometimes we might have to go a little bit quicker, but um it's always good to go back and read through what we went over to really solidify your understanding of the concepts that we covered. So yeah. Okay, I'm going to close it there. So let's see. So Python lab exercise, great. That's good to hear most of you. That's how most of you fared. Um, we're great as well for the bug busters. That's good as well. A couple of you guys didn't attempt it. A couple of you guys said they were easy. Um, that's good to see. I see a couple of people say that was hard, so that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. All right, let's get started with today's session. So, plan for today is we are going to look at one cool application of software engineering, and we're going to see more of those guys as we go through our sessions. We also want to just kind of provide some, uh, just kind of show you guys what you guys might expect if you guys do end up as someone who's coding, who's programming, or who becomes a software engineer, what certain things you can expect as you get out into the real world. We're also going to review our scope and global stuff, global keyword stuff we went over last week. And then the main focus of today's session is Booleans, if-else statements, rational and logical operators. Okay. So looking how to deal with certain conditions. Okay. So one big application of software engineering, and this is fairly new, and I assume most of you would have heard of Tesla and how a lot of, if not all of their vehicles have the self-driving application to them. So a lot of that is possible because of software engineers, right? So those automated vehicles often are filled with sensors uh, to detect traffic lights, to detect lines on the road, to detect other vehicles. But essentially it comes down to the software engineer and the programs that they write to do something with that information, right? Because those sensors only take in input. We need to do something with that input, right? And that comes down to a software engineer's that's what a software engineer ends up having to be responsible for is what do we do with that? How do we make it? How do we do something with that information, right? This is one thing to keep in mind. Like I said, we'll see more as we go out through our sessions. But this is just one. This is also a recent one, which is nice. So yeah. So quick review of scope. So remember that variables is started inside of a function. So like set up and draw don't exist outside of it. If we have variables outside of all functions are called global variables. So you put those, say, before you even define, set up, or draw, right? But if you want to use them inside of a function and you want to use that value, you need to use the global keyword, okay? How's everyone feeling with scope? Does everyone understand it? Does anyone have any trouble with it? How are you guys feeling about scope? If you guys could just put something in the chat. Good, good. Scope is one of those things too, guys, that I, in my experience, have like felt, yeah, it's pretty easy, but then there's always one or two times where it it kind of bites you in the back a bit because it doesn't you miss one little thing and then you're spending hours looking at your code when you really you're using the wrong version of a variable or something like that. But it's good that you guys feel comfortable with it. Okay. So again, this is a quick example, right? If we have X defined out here and we want to use it in our draw, we have to define it global inside of our draw function, okay? So let's get into Booleans and comparisons. So I think it was in our first session that we talked about different types of variable types. So like strings, integers, floats, and stuff like that. So we actually have one more and it's called a Boolean. So a Boolean is a value that can only be set, or a Boolean variable is a variable that can only be set to true or false. Okay. And they're useful for checking logic and checking conditions and comparing things. Okay. So as an example, we have down here, if you see the in high school equals true. So when we're setting this variable in high school to true. Okay. That's just how you would define a variable like that. If you want to do, say, it's summer, right? If you look at this variable, it's summer here is equal to false. Okay. When you put in true or false, it has to be capitalized because if you guys remember, Python is a case sensitive language, right? Most, if not all programming languages are. So if you were to put a lowercase true, you would get a lowercase t with true, you would get an error. Okay. But if you want to actually set it's true or false, you need that capital there. Okay. So we also have comparison operators. So if we have like those two variables that we had before in high school or in summer, right, we could compare them, right? Or you can also compare what's it called? Integer values, okay? Between variables. So these are some of the operands that we use, right? So we have the less than operator, we have the less than or equal to, okay? We also have greater than or equal to, and not equal to. Okay. One key note. If you guys look at the equal sign, okay, if you see two equal signs like this, that means you're checking whether or not the variable on the left is equal to the variable on the right of this symbol here. Okay. Right. We've seen the single equal sign, and that means you're assigning a value to that variable. Okay. So remember, two equal signs, you're comparing. One equal sign is you're assigning a value. Okay. So here's some examples, right? So if we wanted to print if 1 is less than or equal to or less than 4, right? This statement would print true. Okay. When you see these operands that we talked about here, right? When they're executed or when Python reads it, right? It's going to either return true or false. Okay. So it doesn't print 1 less than 4, it actually prints true. Okay. Same sort of deal here. You can take values within a variable and compare them to either other variables, right, as we see on the right here, or to just constants that we use. So if we want to check the value of a, right, and we want to check that it's greater than or equal to 0, right? We can do that, right? And in this statement, because a is -5, it's not greater than or equal to 0, this will print false, right? And like I said, you can compare variables. So if we have x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 57, we're checking to see if x is not equal to y. That statement is true, so true gets printed. Okay. So we can also combine conditions. Okay. So this is just like a brief example, right? So we have two keywords that we can use when we combine conditions. Okay, we have and we have or. Okay. And checks the statement to the left and the right and checks if they're both true. If they're both true, okay, then this statement in its entirety returns true, right? So the statement programming is fun and programming is useful, right? This statement will return true because programming is fun and it is useful, okay? But if we have the statement where Halloween has candy and Halloween has Easter eggs, this returns false because one of the two statements is false, okay? Because Halloween doesn't have Easter eggs, obviously. So this, like I said, this entire statement would return false. If you were to put like print this, right? And let's say these were variables, this would return false, okay? Now we also have or. So unlike and, only one of the statements on either side of the or statement needs to be true in order for the whole statement to be true, okay? So if we had the statement like Halloween has candy or Halloween has Easter eggs, this would return true, okay? Because one of the statements is true, so the whole thing is true. And is the opposite and needs both things to be true and for the whole statement to be true, okay? If it's not true, guys, remember, it's false, okay? So let's again look at all, so we can look at all the logical operators that we just covered, right? So if we go through each of these statements, so and, right, true if only all the Boolean statements are true, right? We just talked about that, right? So we can see here that 5 is greater than 3 and 6 is greater than 3, right? This would be true, okay? If we were to put this inside of a print statement, we would get true, okay? And then we have the opposite here, right? Where 5 is greater than 3, that part is true, and 6 is less than 3, that part's false, okay? So then this whole thing would print out false if we put that in a print statement, okay? Again, we have or, right? Or is the opposite, right? So if any one of the statements is true, okay, then it returns true. 5 greater than 3 or 6 is less than 3, right? That returns true because 5 is greater than 3. We get one true, we're good. Don't need to worry about the rest, okay? But if both are false, like this statement here, we're going to get false, okay? There's one more that we have, right? And that's not, right? One more logical operator. And not basically takes the statement to the right of it, checks whether or not if it's true or false, and then prints out the opposite or returns the opposite, okay? So 6 less than 3, that statement in itself is false, but we're saying not that, okay? So that actually prints out true if we were to put that in a print statement, okay? Does that make sense? It's we'll use it a lot in this session, guys, so don't worry if you don't understand it right away, okay? So we also, if you guys look in the slides, we have a truth table, right? To kind of simplify it for you guys, right? You can go through, right? Not true is false, not false is true. I won't go over this whole thing. I'll leave this more so for you guys to use. It might be good to have up for your first few assignments when you're using logical operators, just as a kind of a reminder, okay? I know I definitely made something like this when I was first learning how to code and first dealing with logical operators. It does come in handy. Okay. So now we're going to get into if statements. Okay. So the way an if statement works in Python and in most languages is if a certain condition is true, run a certain code. That's basically the gist of it, right? So we have an if statement. If that statement is true, right, run the code underneath that if statement, okay? If it's not true, skip over, okay? It's conditional code. It only runs if a certain condition is met, okay? It can be very handy and is used all the time in any coding assignment, project, or program, okay? So let's look at an example. Okay. So let's say your house is cold and you need your thermostat to do something. Or your thermostat does something and you need to do something because of that. Okay. So this is the syntax for an if statement. So you just need to put if, right? And then whatever you're checking. Okay. So if the house temp is a variable and you want to check if it's less than 20, you want to run this code underneath. Okay. Don't forget the indentation. Okay. It's the same as while loops. It's the same as functions like that we've done in setup and draw. Okay. Also, don't forget the colon at the end here. Okay. But essentially what will happen, right, is if the house temp is less than 20, right, the furnace on will be set to true. That will happen. Okay. If the house temp is greater than 25, right, the furnace will be turned off essentially, or the furnace will not be on. Okay. This is basic syntax. Again, we'll build on this more. Okay. So let's look at this disappearing ball example, right? So we have a line in the middle of the screen. Okay. The line starts at, the line goes down the middle of the screen, which you can see is the X value of that is 250, right? And now what we're doing is, as this program is running, okay, is we're checking to see if the mouse X, you guys remember mouse X from last week, right? It tracks the X value of your cursor anywhere on the window. Okay. If the mouse X is less than 25, right, we want to have this circle printed out, and then it's just going to follow the what's it called, your cursor around only on the left side of the screen. Okay. So and then the other thing is too is if the mouse X is not less than 250, you can see that this code doesn't get run. You guys see how on the right side of the screen there's no circle being made. Okay. So it's conditional code is essentially what it is. Okay. So we also, to pair in with the if statement, we also have something what's called an else statement. Okay. So we saw that like if a condition is equal to true, we'll do this thing. All right. But if that condition is not true and we have something specific we want it to do, right, we can specify that under the else statement. Okay. Right. So like an example would be like if you're driving, right, and you get a phone call, you're going to let the call go to voicemail. If you're not driving, right, or right, then you're going to pick up the phone and answer. Okay. One key thing with else, guys, is you need an if condition above it before you have an else. Okay. And you can't have code. Okay. So if you have your if condition and then you have the indentation and then any code you write, if you write some code that doesn't have that indentation and then you put else, you will get an error. Okay. It has to go if code and then else if you have an else statement there. Okay. And then again, you need the indentation as well. Okay. So this is again, like we have a bit of order of execution, what happens. So let's say we have some code before, and then we arrive at an if statement, right? If that statement is true, okay, we're going to run the code underneath the if statement, okay? If that statement is false, right, and we have an else statement put in, we're going to run that code in the else statement, okay? Once either of those has run, okay, then the code will continue after those statements, right? So any code that we have after our else statement that's not in the else statement will then continue to run. Okay. So, right. So now let's expand on that one other example that we had. So instead of the ball disappearing when the cursor goes to the right, we're now going to mirror that ball. Okay. So we know that if the cursor is on the left-hand side of the screen, right, we want to have the cursor have a ball. We're going to create a ball with a dark red, and we're going to have it follow the cursor on the left side of the screen. Okay. That hasn't changed from the last example. But now, if the cursor is on the right-hand side of the screen, okay, we want to create a ball that mirrors our cursor. Okay. So if this is, again, like you're going through the if statement, right? If the mouse X is less than 250, perfect. We're going to run the if statement code. If it's not, however, then we're going to run whatever is underneath the else. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? So let's do our first question for the day. I hope you guys are still all on Top Hat. But so we're asking what's going to be the color of the background and the ball when the mouse X is equal to 100. Okay. So let's look at this code here. So we have an if statement that checks if mouse X is greater than 250, run this code. If it's not, we're going to run this code. Okay. So I'm going to start that on Top Hat. Just start here. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this up for you guys to see. And then the question has started on Top Hat. Okay, just under 30 seconds, guys. I might add an extra 15 just because it looks like not everyone has answered yet. All right, it looks, oh, just have a couple people answering. Okay, last 10 seconds. Okay, and we're done. Okay, so let's take a look at the responses. So for most of you guys, so most of you said the background will be blue and the ball will be yellow. Okay, let's check. And that would be right. Okay, so I see some of you guys, the second highest response was the ball will be green. Okay, so let's go over it real quick, right? Oops. If we look here, right? So we know mouse X is 100. Okay, so first statement is going to check if mouse X is greater than 250. We know it's not, right? Because mouse X is 100. So this code is not going to be executed. Okay. So then we're going to go to the else statement. Okay. Now the background is going to be set to blue. Okay. We can see that here. So we know background is blue. Okay. That's fine. But then we have this fill statement here. Okay. That's changing the color of something to green. But if you notice that the fill is within the else statement, right? And it's not actually filling anything because there's no circle underneath it. Okay. And regardless, even if it was even if there was an ellipse underneath here, it wouldn't fill anything, right? We have this fill here that's going to set the color of the circle or of the ball to yellow regardless. Okay. So all right, so that's going to take us also into our next exercise, our first exercise of the session. So in this exercise, guys, we're going to want you guys to try and get a ball to just get to start from the left-hand side and move to the right until it disappears, but then it needs to reappear back. So it needs to loop constantly, okay? Don't worry about creating a loop. Remember, draw always loops continuously, okay? It's a little bit of a hint where you might want to put your code. But the thing you guys are going to need to implement most is an if statement. Okay. Just one more thing as well. Remember, top left corner is 0, 0, right? And top left or top right corner will be the max X value that you can have and 0 in the Y. Okay. There's no skeleton code for this one. So whenever you guys are ready, feel free to start and we'll get the breakout rooms going. And I think for this exercise, we'll do it in about 15 minutes. We'll do it for about 15 minutes. So yeah.
All right, and just before I open up the breakout rooms, today we don't have two mentors, Zaid and Abraham. So if you're in, if that's your mentor, I have reassigned you to other groups. So just know that when you go in. All right, I'll open up the rooms for 15 minutes, starting now.
As you guys are coming in, just let me know how the exercise went for you guys. Did you guys figure it out? I know my group, for the most part, didn't seem to have any problems. Great, good. Anyone else? How did it go for you guys? Good. That's what I like to see. Yeah. Okay, let's go over the solution. Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to say, guys, before we get into this is, let me zoom in because I know you guys can't read that. It's gonna be a little much. One thing I'm going to say, guys, is if you don't already, and if you have time to, it is really, really good if you can comment out your code. Okay. What that means is just putting little comments. You guys, if you don't remember comments, right, they just need to be preceded by the little hashtag, and then anything to the right of that will not be read by the code. Okay. It's like adding notes throughout your code so that you remember what it does, because once you go into school, right, and if you go into university, and if you do, say, computer science, software engineering, anything where you're programming, and you're, say, either working in a group or you're coming back to code that you haven't seen in a while, commenting out your code can save you a lot of time. Just because you just put like little notes, be like, oh yeah, this does this. Okay, this is what this is doing. This runs if this it happens, and so on. So I just commented out the code just to give you guys an example of a good example of what of commenting your code looks like. Okay, but let's go through it. So we have two variables at the top here, right? We have radius, which is set to an integer value of 20, and then we have x, which is equal to that radius. Okay. We have our setup function, nothing special there. And then in our draw function is where the most of the magic happens. Okay, so for starters, we're going to define x and radius to be global. Okay, we want that because if we were to define x and radius inside, well, more importantly, if we were to define x inside of our draw function, it would always be set to an initial value and the ball would move left to right. Okay, that's why we need to define it outside, right? And then very importantly, at every instance of the Jonathan, I'm going to explain it right here. At the beginning of each draw function, every time we call draw and it loops, we want to set the background in our code. Okay, right, and this is going to disguise any previous balls beforehand, so it's going to give the illusion. I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was last week we went over this. We had one example, but if you call background with a certain color, right, and in this sense we're making it black, right, if you call background inside your draw function, it's going to run the code to print out the background into the window. Okay, so if you want the background to be black like we do here, every time draw is called, it's going to cover up the previous balls that we had before and then print the background over top of it. So it makes it look like the ball's moving left to right, but in reality, it's just covering any previous ball that we had. Okay. And then this is just the color stuff for the ball, right? We're going to set the center to white, and then we're not going to define any color for the outside, right? We don't need it. And then we have our ball, right? Which is the ellipse, right? With the X, the radius, as our Y, right? And then the width and height of the ball, or sorry, width and height, but it's the same because, it's just a ball. And then we're going to increment the X as 3, okay? that's all fine and dandy. This code here will get us moving the ball from left to right. Okay. But okay, if we look at this if statement here, okay, and I've kind of commented it out, but what this is checking is if x, right, minus the radius is greater than 400, right? And remember, the size window goes from 0 to 400. We defined it here, right? Our width is 500. Okay. If the x minus the radius is greater than that value, so the ball is off the screen, we're going to reset x to the radius, right? Which is 20, which is where it started at the beginning of our code. Okay. And then once we check that, it's going to set it, and then we're going to loop back to the top of draw, and it's going to continue. Okay. So you guys can see at every instance of draw, every time it's run, we're always checking the value of x, always checking. Okay. To see if the ball is in the position that we want it to be. Okay. So yeah, so then again, like if we run it, you can see right about there, it resets. Okay. So yeah. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone have any other questions before I move on? No? Okay. So let's move on to if, else, or if, elif, and else. Okay. So we saw if and else, but now we have one more that's called elif. Okay. Elif is short for else if. Okay. So you can have multiple elif statements, right? And underneath your if statement, right? So the way to think about it is like elif is kind of used. It's like if the first condition or the previous conditions aren't met, but there's another specific condition that you want to meet. Is my microphone glitching for you guys as well? Or is it just the one person? That's good. Okay. So, right. So and the beautiful thing about elif too is you can have multiple of these. You can have as many as you want, right? Again, with elif, like else, you need an if statement before it in order for it to work. Okay. But so let's look at the example here, right? So we have price is equal to $33 or 33.00. Okay. So we check first if the price is greater than 40, right? We're going to run this. Okay. We know it's not, right? It's 33. Okay. Then we're going to check if the price is greater than 30. Okay. If it is, we're going to print this. Okay. And if neither of those first two conditions are right, okay, then we're going to just print it's a great deal. Okay. So this is kind of a diagram to show kind of what happens, right? So price is equal to 30. We're going to check, is the price greater than 40? If it's not, or sorry, if it is, we're going to print it's too expensive. If it's not, we're going to go to the elif statement and check that one. Okay. Then we'll check, hey, is the price greater than 30? If it is, great. We'll print out it's a good deal. If it's not, we'll go to the else statement. Okay. And then the else statement will run no matter what. Okay. So you can also, if you guys remember the logical operators that we covered in the beginning of the session, right? You can also use those with if statements, right? So we have two variables here in this example, like green eggs and like ham. Okay. Both are set to false, right? In this statement, this if statement is checking if, so you guys remember how not works? It inverts the Boolean value of the variable. So like green eggs is false, but we're asking for the not of it. So then that flips it to true. Okay. And, right, we have to check the other statement on the right. We have not like ham, right? Ham, like green eggs, is also false. So the not of false is true. Okay. So both sides of the and are true. Then we're going to print, I do not like green eggs and ham, and I do not like them, Sam, I am. Okay. So so we can push it even further, right? And we compared, what was it called? Variable values, right? In the exercise that we just did. But here's another example, right? So we can also have multiple checks, right? Or multiple conditions in one line of if statement, right? Like we saw before, but we can also do it with integer values. So we can check if the mouse X of the cursor is greater than 250 and the mouse Y is 250, greater than 250. Okay. If that's the case, the ball is going to turn to green, right? As you can see, right? That's this bottom square here, right? It gives us specific conditions. So if both are true, then we're going to fill it. okay, with that color. So let's we'll have our second question of the day, right? And so we want to know what is the color of the circle when the mouse's X is equal to 150 and the mouse Y is equal to 50. Okay, so that's this top right corner here, giving this if else statement here. Okay, so the first one checks if mouse is greater than 100 and if mouse X is greater than 100 and mouse Y is greater than 100. Okay, the second one checks if mouse X is less than 100 or not the same as and, or mouse Y is less than 100. And if neither of those conditions are true, then we're just going to fill it with this color down here. Okay. So I'm going to start that question now. Just pull it up. I have too many tabs open. Okay. The question is live, so feel free to go ahead and start answering, guys. Again, I'll leave this up on the screen so you guys can see. The numbers, they're highlighted there. So for the first one, like so for the first if statement, it's going to fill it red. The second one's going to fill it green, and the third one's going to fill it blue. Red, green, blue, RGB. Always remember that. Where are we at with? Okay, so we're in the last 30 seconds here. Ten seconds. All right. Let's see what you guys said and let's check the responses. So most of you said that it would be green. Okay. And that is correct. Okay. So well done. Okay, so let's just go through it so you guys understand why it's green. Okay. So first statement here that's going to get checked is check if mouse X is greater than 100. Okay. Is it? Yes, it is. Okay, because it's 150. So that's good. Okay. But then we have an and statement. Okay. And this and needs both sides of it, like both statements on either side, to be true in order for this whole thing to be true. And if that's true, the code underneath it will be run. Okay. So then it checks if the mouse Y is greater than 100. Well, it's not. It's equal to 150. So this will not run because one of the two statements is true. Therefore, this is false. Okay, it needs both. Okay, let's check the elif statement. So elif says that if mouse X is less than 150, it's not. Okay, so that's false. Okay, but we have an or here. And in order for an or statement to be true, only one of the two statements, either side of it, need to be true. Okay, so let's check the mouse Y one. Mouse Y one says, hey, it checks if mouse Y is less than 100. Well, mouse Y is 150, so this statement is true. So then because this is an or, this whole statement is true. Since this whole statement is true, this elif statement has a true statement in it, and it's going to run the code underneath it, and then it's going to ignore the rest. Okay, it's not going to do this else statement. It's going to say, okay, we found our true value. We found the condition that's been met. We're going to run this code and then just skip to the end. Okay, so that's why it's green. Does that make sense? The thing with if-else statements is when you have a series of if-else statements, okay, it checks all the conditions, right? And then once it finds the first one that's true, it skips the other ones and then just continues to the code that's after those statements. Okay. When would it ever be blue? So if the mouse Y would say be, so like we could have a mouse Y of it'd have to be, oh wow, that's actually a tricky situation. So 150, that doesn't run that one. Oh, you would need a value. So like you could keep this, right? But if you changed mouse Y to like 75, right? Because mouse Y would not be, oh, it is less than 100. Oh, and maybe it wouldn't. This is more so just to test your guys' knowledge, right? But yeah, maybe if we have time at the end, I'll come back and see if I can come up with a situation where it would be blue. Okay, so and then this is actually going to bring us into exercise 2. So this one I think we'll do for about 15, maybe 20. We'll see how we're doing, right? So now we're going to try and what's it called? Set up your if else statements so that the ball changes color depending on which quadrant it's in. Okay. Now for this code, there is skeleton code. So if you have access to the slides, it's just in the notes here. Okay. Right. The setup and draw functions are here, but if you don't, I'm going to put it into the code into the chat for you guys. Okay. It's right there. Keep in mind that this code does not have the from processing import star, and it does not have the run function. So you guys need those if need those in order for that code to work. Okay. But yes, so you're gonna look to change the circle in every quadrant. Color doesn't matter, just as long as it's not the same color as the other 3 quadrants, that's fine. Okay. And then yes, I saw there was one quick question. Let me just answer it. So mouse Y, mouse X essentially represent the X and Y values of the mouse. Yes, exactly. So remember, if you were here last week, mouse X, mouse Y just gives the coordinate values of wherever the X is on your screen. It just tracks it. Okay. Also Ahmed, yes, you had a good answer to, I think it was Conrad's question for the quick question. Yeah, if X and Y, if we look at this real quick, if mouse X and mouse Y are exactly 100, neither of these statements are going to run. So that would be a case of when the circle would be blue. Okay. But this is up. So let's get into our breakout rooms and try this out. Does everyone have access to the skeleton code? I hope you do. But yeah, we'll give this about 15 minutes. We're making pretty good time today. So see you guys in 15. Okay, looks like mostly everyone's back anyways. So if you guys just want to put in the chat, just tell me how you found that exercise. I know that my group, mostly everyone, if not everyone, excuse me, got it working. For those of you who weren't in my group, how are you guys feeling? Good, good. Okay, sweet. So let's go over a solution. Yes, here we go. Okay, so That works well. Good. Okay. So the biggest thing about this was just implementing the if else statements, right? So from the skeleton code we gave you, I believe we gave you up to like this plus the drawing of the circle, and we just wanted to see you guys add these statements here. Okay. So we'll go over it quickly, right? We defined a square by 500 by 500, just set the background color to be 20, right? In our draw, right? So we don't have infinite amount of circles being shown. Had our 2 lines, okay? And then you guys were given this one, right? So like if the mouse is less than 20, mouse X is less than 250, so left-hand side of the screen, and the mouse Y is less than 250 as well, so top left corner, right? It's going to be red, okay? Then, right, we have the else if statement, right? That checks if the mouse X is greater than 250, but also the mouse Y is less than 250. So that checks for the top right hand of the screen. You can see it turn green, right? Remember the values are GB, right? So green is turned to the max. We're going to get green, okay? And then the last statement checks that if mouse X is less than 250, so left-hand side of the screen, but mouse Y is greater than 250, so bottom left corner, then we're going to get Y, okay? Which gives us yellow. And then we have the else statement. So that says if it's not one of these 3, right, we're going to just make it blue, which we do. And that just gives us the color for the bottom left corner. Okay. Now, some of you, what you could have done, right, is you could have just said, hey, you could just done another if else statement that checks to see if the mouse X is greater than 250. So on the right hand side of the screen, and the mouse Y is greater than 250. So that puts in the bottom right corner. You could have done that, or you could have done the if statements or the else statements for 3 of them, and then just else the last one. That's one way to do it as well. So, any questions about that before we move on? Does that make sense? No? Okay, perfect. So along with, so we've seen before that we can check where our cursor is on the screen. We can also check for mouse clicks. Okay. So we have a variable called mouse pressed that will return either true or false. Okay. When the mouse is pressed. So if the mouse is pressed, right, it'll return true. So you could use that for an if statement, right? And, or if it's not pressed, it'll just be false. So most of the time it'll be false unless you're clicking the button. Okay. And it also note that like it doesn't matter where your cursor is, as long as you are like on the tab of your screen for your trinket and you are clicking the mouse, it will return true. Okay. So just a quick example, right? If the mouse is pressed, right? So if true, right? This will return true if the mouse is pressed, right? It'll print mouse is pressed. And then this is just print this text, and then it'll set the fill color of the circle to red, right? If it's not pressed, however, then I'll say mouse is not pressed, and then set the color to white. Okay. And then for that circle, it's just a basic example. Okay. So that pretty much brings us to the end. There's a few more things you have to go over. Just a quick reminder that if you guys want to be eligible for that certificate proving that you completed this course, you need to attend 6 of the 8 sessions. So if you've missed the first 2, not including session 0, that the introductory session we had, if you've missed the first 2 sessions and you want the certificate, you need to come to the rest of the sessions. Okay. You can only miss 2. This is the 3rd session. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Right. Any questions about your submissions? Right. Please ask a mentor. If you can, try and ask your mentor directly. I'll have to get back to you about that. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe if one of the other mentors know. What do you mean by the certificate is online? Like you get like an online copy? I believe you do. I'm not 100% sure, but And then so this brings us no, we keep track of the marks, Conrad, and then we will input them into the sheets. Okay. So the exercises for this week to do next week. For bug busters, it's pretty similar to the one that we did in our first exercise, except for you're gonna want the ball going back and forth, not just resetting. Okay. And for the second exercises for bug busters, right? We'll have a ball in the circle, and you're going to want to anytime you click, the ball is going to go to where your cursor is, okay, and it's going to follow it through or follow it around the screen, right? For Pythonic Lava, you're going to build on the first exercise we did again today, except for you're going to have the ball bounce around the screen. Okay. This requires a little bit more thinking about what you want to do to a variables when the ball hits a certain point on the screen. Okay. And then for the second exercise, you're gonna have a ball that just sits, right? And as you click the mouse, it's going to rise. Once the mouse is not being pressed, it's going to decrease. Okay. If you can, add some gravity into it. Okay. Or at least, sorry, no, you need to add some gravity into it. But again, guys, with every exercise, it's always good to build in steps, right? Use print statements, use comments to keep track of what you're doing. Okay. And test by increments. Don't write a 100-line program and then test it. You're gonna probably have tons of errors, and it's gonna be a pain to debug. Write a couple of lines, test it. Write a couple more lines, test it. Okay. Yeah. And if you finish those two exercises, these are the two ones for fun. So I don't know if you guys have ever played Brick Breaker, but this is kind of what the second one is like. Okay. The fifth one seems a little bit more difficult. But you're kind of almost creating, like, I don't know if you guys have ever played Pool on the iPhone mini games, Game Pigeon, or whatever it's called. It's kind of a similar idea, right? But then for the one on the left, every time you click, it resets the ball after the ball is moving. Okay. Oh, and that brings us to the end. So does anyone have any questions? We got about 5 minutes before we're done. Can we check? I'll just read the ones that we have. Can we see our marks at the top? I think I answered that. Where can you check whether our submissions was marked or not? I believe. Oh, geez. I can't remember. If any of the mentors have the answer to that question, could they just put it in the chat, please? And is the gala in person? I believe the gala is online. It might be on in person. I can't remember it as well. Let me see if I can find that out for you real quick. The gala is online. Okay, perfect. Yes. Yes, it does. That counts as attendance. Being in the geez, I'm showing you guys solutions. Whoops. Ooh. Yes. Any other questions, guys? Don't need to, Clara, but I highly recommend it. Okay. It's gonna help the instructors also kind of see your way of thinking, because there's so many ways you could code a program. Like we went over this example. This is our second example, and this is like one way to do it, but there's other ways to do it as well. So adding comments and letting people know, letting the reader, whether that be you or the marker or someone else in your group, if you're doing a group project, is really helpful, right? Because it lets, like in this case, it lets us help. It helps us understand kind of your thinking, your thought process, right? Because yeah, like if we could be marking it and we could be like, well, what the heck were they thinking here? Why are they doing this? Right? It helps if you call that stuff out. Uh the assignments, so like do you mean like what you're specifically supposed to do? Because in terms of for the assignments, like what you're supposed to do, whether or not you're in Bug Busters or in Pythonic Lava, um we are just giving you an example and then we're asking you to code it. So these are the examples, say for bug busters. Okay. And then we're asking you to replicate them using your own code. Okay. And then to submit them, you just need to go to the Schulich website again. Or Schulich Ignite, sorry. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions? We still got about 5 minutes, guys. We also are at the end, guys. So you can always change the colors. Colors are never really that important. The only thing I'm going to say is that, like, because for some of the exercises, we what's it called? For some of the exercises, like we were changing the color based on where an object was. Like if we have something like that, like we ask that you replicate the fact that it is changing color, right? But if like on like for this first example here, like if the ball was blue and the background was yellow, it's not really it doesn't matter. You can change the colors. But if color changing is part of the assignment, make sure that they are changing colors. What colors they are doesn't matter. Okay. Be a little creative, guys, right? We want you guys to have fun with this stuff too. Um and December 9th is the gala. Yes, I believe so. Oops. Yes. They got so for those of you guys didn't see it, Janine just put in the chat that December 9th is the last session. So that's the last session we have. That's on the 8th, right? The date for the gala hasn't been decided yet, but the attendance for session 8, which is on December 9th, does matter, but the gala does not matter, right? That's like an end of year kind of get together that we have to showcase that you guys can showcase your code, listen to guest speakers talk that are in the industry. And yeah. Anything else, guys, before we leave? We're at about 1:30 here. If you guys don't have any more questions, feel free to leave. Yeah. If you are leaving, have a good weekend. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you need help, like I say, always say, guys, sometimes it's better to just directly message us on Discord. I don't think the bot commands are up yet still. So if you are really struggling, just message a mentor directly. It's a lot quicker.
All right, mentors. We'll get into a breakout room soon. All right, there we go.